CEO mocked janitor with a challenge: discover the hidden secret that changed everything forever. In the sterile expanse of the conference room, CEO Claire Green's scathing voice crackled through the silence, slicing into Tom's already frayed sense of worth. What could a janitor possibly contribute to a project no one else can solve? Stares of disbelief and smirks of disdain erupted around him, like knives driven into his chest. For decades, Tom had clenched his fists around the broom, scrubbing the floors of a tech empire, but here in this moment, he felt the weight of that very diminutive role crush him. The laughter echoed in his ears long after Claire's dismissive tone faded, wrapping around him like a new stud. As he slumped on the break room chair, the remnants of the meeting gnawed at him, a bitter aftertaste settling in his gut. Could he really challenge her idea of him? He had always embraced humility, always taken pride in his honest work. And yet, as he stared at the half-empty coffee cup, an ember sparked within him. This wasn't just another insult, it was an opportunity, a single light flickering amid an oppressive darkness. His fingers trembled with desperation, pressing a pen against the notepad in a heartbeat that echoed in his ears. Tom stood at a moral crossroads. He could dwell in the shadows her words had thrust upon him or dare to illuminate his existence. He pushed the notebook away. Fear clashed with a rising determination. Countless nights spent learning while the world slept whispered a promise of potential that lay dormant for too long. What if he could rise above the floor he scrubbed, become more than the man who merely swept away the remnants of busy minds? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The rest of the day bled into night, and as the office quieted, Tom's resolve crystallized. Surrounded by unfamiliar technology, he still felt its pulse quickening under his fingertips. Each late-night epiphany brought him closer to his buried aspirations. He discovered the complicated web of ideas that intertwined innovation and empathy. But, with every flicker of inspiration, doubts crashed like waves against the shores of his mind. Was he truly worthy? Would he be heard? Or was he just a janitor trying to break free from the confinement of a label he hated? On the cusp of the next morning, emotions knotted tightly in his chest like coiled springs. Tom entered the conference room for another meeting. This time, he was armed with ideas that challenged the very foundation of the company. Would anything change? The reeling uncertainty loomed larger than any obstacle he had faced. He inhaled deeply, anticipation building into a painful crescendo within him. What if he failed? What if he succeeded against all odds but faced the wrath of a CEO whose pride wouldn't allow for a janitor's brilliance? As Tom stood, hands trembling slightly beneath the table, he understood that everything was at stake. Everyone's eyes bore down on him, yet he could feel a tiny spark of hope. Claire's gaze felt like fire. It was a crossroads not merely of ideas, but of identity. Would he remain the invisible man in the shadows, or step into the brilliance he now dared to imagine? In this moment, the answer hung tantalizingly close, but defining it remained locked within the tension of silence, leaving him poised on the precipice of transformation. Tom's heart raced as he rose to address the assembled executives. The scars of past humiliation still throbbed in his chest, yet he felt a peculiar sense of liberation. If anything, Claire Green's words served as a catalyst fueling a resolve that had lain dormant for years. Clearing his throat, Tom focused on each face in the room, calculating the weight of their expectations and skepticism. "I've been asked what a janitor could contribute to this project," he started, his voice steadying as he spoke. "But what I know is that the role I've played in this company has given me a unique perspective." Eyes shifted as he continued, showcasing a growing confidence that surprised even himself. "I understand the impact of every decision made here. With each late night spent cleaning up after you all, I've analyzed what works, what brings productivity, and what disrupts harmony. The messes are often more than just physical, they reflect the underlying issues in the workplace. As he spoke, Tom became aware of the shift in atmosphere. His words, initially met with skepticism, began to gain some traction that he laid out his thoughts on the project's demands, piecing together how empathy and technological innovation could coexist. He spoke of simple solutions sourced from observation, the need for better communication tools, a reformation in workspaces that fostered team collaboration, and the necessity to prioritize emotional well-being alongside productivity. The executives leaned in closer, a subtle but significant shift in energy. With each point he made, Tom felt the weight of his old label begin to evaporate. He wasn't just a janitor, he was a voice for change, a catalyst for creativity and productivity. Striking an unexpected chord of resonance, he shared personal anecdotes about colleagues he'd seen struggle with stress. A company exists on its people, he insisted, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. The best innovations arise from environments where everyone feels heard. Claire's gaze flickered, a moment of acknowledgement flickering behind her piercing demeanor. That moment gave him a rush of adrenaline, propelling him forward even as doubt tugged at his mind, urging him to retreat to the familiar shadows. As Tom concluded his thoughts, a new question erupted within him: was he truly ready to claim this new identity? He had carved out a space for himself, one that extended beyond the broom and the aisle he cleaned, yet was he equipped to maintain it? The silence that followed was oppressive, filled with tension and expectancy. Tom wiped clammy hands on his trousers, feeling both exhilaration and anxiety swirling in his gut. Would this be a moment of achievement or another misstep laid bare for all to see? Claire broke the silence, her voice now measured and contemplative. You raise valid points, Tom. But it would take a monumental shift to integrate such changes. How can we trust that someone with your background can sustain this vision? Tom inhaled sharply. Claire's challenge was a gauntlet thrown down before him, bolstered by the knowledge that this was no mere question, it was a call to action, pushing him to prove not only himself but also his worth. I am prepared to take that risk, Claire. I will prove that my experience isn't a limitation, it's the key to unlocking innovation. His words echoed in the silence, a declaration that felt like walking a tightrope. With the room's expectations teetering on his shoulders, Tom grasped the magnitude of the step he had taken. If success could emerge from this, it would mean an irrevocable transformation not only in his life but in the corridors of the tech empire that had once dismissed him. As the meeting adjourned, Tom was left with a singular thought: his journey forward was shrouded in uncertainty, yet imbued with a scintilla of hope. The moment had arrived for him to defend the validity of his insights. What awaited him outside the conference room? A path fraught with challenges or the bright light of opportunity? The door swung open, revealing not only the vast office space beyond, but the true test of his newfound identity. Tom stepped through, gripping the edge of the threshold, aware that this was just the beginning of a battle he was ready to face. What he didn't know was the extent to which his past would act as both an anchor and a launching pad. The tension of that uncharted territory hung heavy in the air, a reminder that the real confrontation was only just beginning. As Tom stepped into the bustling office space, a mix of enthusiasm and apprehension coursed through him. The hum of conversation surrounded him, but he felt as though he were moving in slow motion, allowing himself a moment to take in the reality of this new landscape. The glass walls, the sleek furniture, and the people who moved with purpose and urgency, these were the hallmarks of a world he had long observed from the sidelines. Now he was part of it, and the gravity of that fact was both exhilarating and daunting. The challenge posed by Claire's words echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. Trust. That single word haunted him, weighing heavy on his shoulders. He could feel all the skepticism that had ever been directed toward him, the whispers and the laughter that had carved away at his self-worth over the years. Yet here he was, determined to build a bridge from his past to this new opportunity. Tom took a deep breath and headed for his modest cubicle, a small corner that would serve as the launch pad for his ambitions. He sat down, the chair creaking slightly as he did. The dim screen of his computer flickered to life, and he opened a blank document, the empty canvas that awaited his thoughts. But as his fingers hovered over the keyboard, he frowned. Where to begin? The raw honesty of his insights from the meeting lingered in his mind. He had a wealth of ideas, realizations about workplace dynamics and the potential for innovation. Yet each insight now felt like a weight pressing down on him. Tom realized he needed a strategy, or else all these ideas would drown in self-doubt. Searching for a foothold, he decided to reach out to the colleagues he had encountered in his years of janitorial work. A small network of friendships had formed over shared frustrations and casual conversations. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found Frank, a former IT guy turned developer, who had also felt the weight of the office politics over the years. "Hey, Frank," Tom's voice trembled slightly, but there was a firm resolve behind it. "I'm looking to bounce a few ideas around for a project. Can we grab coffee later?" "Sure, man." "Sounds great," Frank replied, his tone casual yet warm and inviting comfort in the face of Tom's uncertainty. The prospect of dialogue ignited a flicker of determination within him. He mapped out an agenda not just for the meeting but for what he wanted to accomplish personally. As he prepared, a profound realization dawned upon him. This was not solely an agenda focused on innovation or productivity, it was a quest for his own legitimacy. The effort to convince Claire and the others depended on his capacity to give voice to his lived experiences, cementing his place in the conversation space. The transformation required him to connect his observations to concrete proposals, to translate ideas formed in the margins of his life into initiatives that could potentially shift the culture of the workplace. Hours later, sitting across from Frank in a cozy coffee shop, Tom poured out his vision, every observation he had made over the years, articulated with the newfound clarity and confidence he had gained. Frank listened intensely, nodding, peppering in questions that helped refine Tom's ideas. "Tom, you've got something special here," Frank remarked, leaning forward. "You need to frame this correctly or they'll write you off again, just like before. If you can ground your observations in data or examples, they'll see you as an authority." His heart raced again, not from fear this time but from the prospect of having an ally in navigating this new terrain. As they deepened their conversation, the words poured from Tom, unearthing solutions that highlighted not only the problems but potential pathways to success. He felt the plan solidifying beneath his hands, like the steady pressure of a sculptor's tools shaping clay. But envisioning a better workplace and projecting authority were one thing. The reality of executing that plan, of facing Claire and the other executives again, remained a daunting journey ahead. Tom left the coffee shop with an invigorating sense of purpose mingling with the familiar twinges of anxiety. This pathway forward was rich with potential, but he still questioned whether he could truly lead the charge for change. Could he rise to the occasion despite everything that had come before? As he turned the corner back to his office, the stakes began to crystallize in his mind. The moment had come to face not only the boardroom but also the woman who had introduced this daunting challenge. He was prepared to take his newfound insights and confront those who had underestimated him. Was he ready to transform his revelation into lasting change, or would he once again fade into the shadows of the corporate hierarchy? The narrowing corridor ahead felt like a tunnel, its end cloaked in ambiguity. But Tom knew one thing: he was no longer content to be relegated to the background. The real test of his resolve lay before him, a test that would either solidify his occupation of this new role as a driver of change or shatter the fragile confidence he had begun to build. He squared his shoulders, prepared to step into the fray where both challenge and possibility awaited. The threshold drew near again, and an electrifying question echoed in his mind: was this the moment he would redefine not just himself, but the very dynamics of the workplace? Tom took a steadying breath as he stepped into the conference room, the air thick with expectation. Long, sleek tables surrounded him, polished to a gleam, but he felt as though they reflected the hard surfaces of his past, reflective, cold, and sometimes unforgiving. Scanning the faces of Claire and the executives, he felt the weight of their scrutiny settle upon him, pressing down with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. This was at the moment he had mentally rehearsed countless times, the juncture where he would confront not only the assumptions about his capabilities but also the assumptions he held about himself. Did he possess the authority to command respect in this space, or would he retreat into his former role, invisible and dismissed? "Thank you all for being here," Claire began, her tone businesslike yet laced with an edge that suggested she was preparing for a more entertaining story than a coming-of-age tale about a janitor. Tom clenched his hands under the table, grounding himself in the simplicity of the action. As Claire presented the agenda, Tom's mind raced. The vivid insights he had shared with Frank flashed through his thought: strategies for innovation, methods for enhancing team communication, approaches to fostering a supportive culture. He had to find the courage to share these ideas clearly and confidently. When the opportunity finally arose for him to speak, his heart quickened. "I'd like to discuss some observations I've made regarding team dynamics and productivity," he began, his voice just above a whisper, but steadying with each word. He recalled Frank's advice, shoring up his resolve. "What I've noticed is that many team members feel trapped in their roles, unable to share their insight due to previous failures or perceptions," Tom continued, risking a glance around the room. To his surprise, there were no dismissive smirks, just narrowed eyes and attentively tilted heads. "By creating a structured feedback system, we can encourage open dialogue and empower employees to step out of their silos." As he spoke, Tom felt a shift in the atmosphere. Executives leaned forward, eyebrows raised as he elaborated on how organizations could harness the unique experiences and insights of all staff members. He could hear a quiet buzz of interest as he illustrated, with concrete examples derived from his years of observation, how the lack of inclusion had stifled creativity and efficiency. Riding the wave of his own momentum, he continued into deeper territory, hesitant but emboldened. "Trust is the foundation of any successful workplace. Without it, innovative ideas remain stifled, and progress becomes sluggish. The conversations I've had, many in the stillness of after-hours cleaning, have revealed a wealth of untapped potential." Claire's expression faltered briefly, revealing a flicker of respect, quickly masked by professionalism. Yet Tom seized on the unexpected acknowledgement, sensing a moment rippling ahead, a chance to turn the tide. "Every individual here brings valuable perspectives to the table," he pressed, his voice swelling with urgency and clarity. "By shifting our approach to a more inclusive one, we can not only drive performance but transform workplace culture." Each statement carved out new possibilities in the air, unearthing something that felt almost tangible. When he zeroed in on data to back his claims, citing productivity reports and employee insights, he felt not only vindicated but also emboldened. Direct engagement with the executive's own dilemmas fortified his resolve. He wasn't simply trying to defend his voice, he was presenting solutions they desperately needed. Yet, as the dialogue progressed, Tom noticed Claire's uneasy demeanor returning, her skepticism slipping back at the edges of her gaze. With each solid point he made, the invisible barrier between them started to rise again, one that echoed the doubts he had conquered but sensed still plaguing her view of him. The meeting rolled onwards, and Tom could feel the back-and-forth he initiated making waves, but he also felt the swell of unpredictability creeping in as he ventured deeper into their discourse. Would their interest result in genuine consideration of his ideas, or would they dismiss him as a fleeting anomaly? As he navigated the discussion, each question from the executives felt like a challenge, further solidifying his presence in the room or potentially threatening to pull him back into his shadow. Still, the fire he had ignited within himself pushed him to confront the very doubts that labeled him the janitor, the underdog. The meeting drew toward its conclusion, and a single question remained: would his attempts translate into any actionable change, or would the comfort of the status quo reassert its dominion? As Tom gathered his notes, readying himself to step back from the spotlight, he caught a whisper from Claire, an offhand remark hinting at another evaluation of his proposals. That was it. If he had sparked a flicker of interest, perhaps it was time to take a calculated risk. Finding his voice again, he spoke up: "I'd like to propose a follow-up meeting where we can further examine these ideas and how they could fit within our current initiatives." In that moment, a profound realization settled over him. This wasn't merely about the proposals or their implementation. It was about his ability to assert himself, to carve a place for his voice, not just as a counterpoint but as a vital catalyst for change. As they considered his suggestion, Tom felt the tension morph into an exhilarating possibility. He had crossed a threshold, an invitation had taken shape, but would they accept? Did he truly have the grit to sustain this new momentum, or would the shadows return to encapsulate him again? The answers lay just out of reach, poised precariously on the edge of balance. Would he seize the opportunity or let it slip away? The tantalizing uncertainty loomed ahead, igniting a new spark of determination within him. Tom left the conference room with a palpable mix of adrenaline and doubt coursing through him. The conversations that had unfolded gnawed at his mind. Were his proposals truly effective, or had the executives merely been too polite to dismiss him outright? He felt a strange amalgamation of pride and apprehension. He had stood up and articulated his thoughts, yet lingering questions clouded his victory. As he walked through the corridors, the usual sounds of a bustling office felt distant, almost muted. He noticed his colleagues, their focused chatter and hurried footsteps a reminder of the roles they played. Would they view him differently now? Would they see him as a peer rather than the janitor? More importantly, would he see himself that way? Tom found himself in a quiet corner of the building, a spot where the reality of his transformation lingered. The reflective surfaces that once served to remind him of his inadequacies now felt inviting, as if they were urging him to consider the height of his aspirations. He pulled out his notes, fanning them across a small table, soaking in the details of his proposals. Each one represented a step away from the labels he had been assigned. Each idea was a thread weaving a new tapestry of who he could yet become. He replayed Claire's expressions in his mind, a critical gaze clouded by something he hoped was curiosity rather than skepticism. The dynamic had shifted. There had been a moment during their exchanges where understanding flickered between them. Though he could feel the remnants of doubt snaking around her convictions, the glimmer of respect thrummed with potential. Deciding to harness that energy, he grabbed his phone and reached out to Frank. They hadn't spoken since the meeting, and Tom recognized the need to keep that connection alive. After a few rings, Frank picked up. "Hey, how'd it go?" he asked, a knowing tone underlying his words. "It went better than I expected," Tom replied, an unexpected buoyancy in his voice. "I proposed a follow-up meeting to dive deeper into my ideas. But I don't quite know how to prepare for it. Preparation is crucial. Keep your focus on the solutions you bring," Frank advised. "But more importantly, think about the atmosphere of the room. Be aware of the dynamics among the executives. Their responses to you might tell you as much about them as your proposals will." Tom nodded as if Frank could see him. "You're right. There's more than just presenting ideas. It's about navigating the very space we operate in. But what if they're not interested? What if this was just a momentary intrigue? Truthfully, who cares? This isn't about them not interested, it's about you believing in your worth," Frank replied, an edge of impatience threading through his words. Tom's heart raced. The familiar doubts whispered at the edges of his consciousness, but he pushed back against them. He was tired of being confined by a narrative that didn't fit. "I want to show them I can contribute significantly, not just as a janitor but as someone who understands the core of what we're trying to achieve together," he asserted, conviction replacing uncertainty. "Then focus on that. Use your unique perspective. It's an asset, not a hindrance. But be prepared for pushback. Sometimes, breaking out means confronting the very structures that janitor title represents." The weight of those words settled over Tom, sent a bolt of clarity through him. He knew there would be hurdles ahead, defensiveness from executives entrenched in their ways, the tug of old fears threatening to pull him back. But he sensed a crucial inflection point. His next steps had the power to either reinforce or dismantle the walls defined by his past. As he ended the call, a fresh determination surged within him. He had built an unexpected momentum. Now was the time to develop a strategy that would withstand scrutiny. Tom studied his notes again, and for the first time, he started drafting a vision statement for the follow-up meeting. If he could articulate not only what changes he wanted to propose but also why they mattered to the people involved, perhaps that would ignite a sense of possibility in them. The hours stretched ahead as he immersed himself in research and refining his ideas, filling the gaps between his observations and the metrics that would speak to their efficacy. He crafted stories and examples that precisely illustrated his points, digging deep into the emotional currents that could arise at the intersection of practicality and inspiration. But just as he felt clarity anchoring him, a knock on the door interrupted his focus. Claire slipped into the small room, a stack of papers in her hands. The air thickened, charged with an unpredictable tension. Tom's pulse quickened as their eyes met. Would this encounter reaffirm his efforts or signal a return to doubt? "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone tethered somewhere between professionalism and a personal overture. The door now opened to myriad possibilities. Could another revelation await him? Did it hinge on their confrontation, one that could unearth the potential for genuine collaboration or resurface his most profound fears? The stakes suddenly felt unbearably high. Tom's heart raced, an urgent rhythm that mirrored the uncertainty swirling in the air. Claire stepped closer, hesitation flickering across her features like shadows, softened by the late afternoon light. Sure," he managed, feeling the weight of her gaze. The moment felt momentous, charged with all the unspoken barriers that had separated them until now. He cleared the notes layered on the table, shifting them to one side. "I've been thinking a lot about your proposals," Claire started, her voice steady yet cautious. "What you said about needing to tap into the core of what we achieved together. It resonated with me." Her admission both thrilled and terrified him. Had he really made an impact? The fleeting spark of satisfaction ignited a flicker of confidence within him, yet the specter of doubt loomed close. "I appreciate that," he replied, keeping his tone calm. "I want to help the company grow, and I believe my ideas can bring that to fruition." She shifted, bright eyes narrowing slightly as she contemplated his response. "Why do you think they'll listen now? You've been in this role for so long. Making that leap, it's not just about being right, it's about being seen as credible." The tone ran straight through his core, a direct challenge that cut deep. Credibility. The word echoed like a haunting refrain. "I'm aware of where I stand, Claire," he said, voice firming. "But I believe I've built knowledge about what we do here that deserves attention. The perspective of someone on the ground, the invisible threads of this organization, they can be insightful." "Maybe," she conceded, but skepticism lingered in her tone. "But it also means confronting not just the opinions of the executives but their insecurities. People don't always react well to being challenged, especially if they're used to hierarchy." Tom nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had sensed this intimidating truth already. It was a reality he couldn't ignore, but the primal urge to break free from the roles assigned to them propelled him forward. "I get that. It's daunting. But wearing the label of janitor, seen through the eyes of others, I want to challenge that. This is me pushing against everything that has pinned me down." Claire studied him closely, trying to decipher the conviction behind his eyes. "You're bold," she said eventually, admiration creeping into her voice. "Most wouldn't have the guts to even admit that." But she hesitated. "You also have to be strategic. Passion alone isn't enough." His chest tightened, he wanted to scream that he had sacrificed so much for this moment. "My passion, my experiences, they offer value. I have ideas waiting to be realized." He countered, anger swelling just beneath his composure. Claire held her hand up slightly. "I'm not discounting your passion, Tom. But it's essential we deliver it in a way that's mutually beneficial. It's about shifting perceptions not solely through words but results. Then let us strategize together," he suggested, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "Let us create a plan that we can unveil in the follow-up meeting, something undeniable." Claire's brows knitted together, hesitation still evident. "You want me to help you navigate the very structures that I'm entrenched in? Don't you think that could backfire?" "Maybe it will," he admitted, the truth weighing on him. "But if we don't try, we'll remain static. Stagnation is far worse than facing failure." Her expression softened, the challenge before them morphing into a glimmer of possibility. "What are you thinking?" He leaned forward, the ideas flooding through his mind. "We start by showcasing the impact these changes could have, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Then, we present a unified front, not just you presenting my ideas but us both owning them together." Claire processed this, her features revealing a shift. That could work. Whatever walls divided them began to crumble in Tom's heart. The prospect of collaboration breathed new life into his ambitions. But deep down, an uneasy feeling lingered, a sense of what was at stake. Would they both navigate these precarious waters smoothly, or would buried tensions sabotage the relationship they were trying to foster? As they began sketching the frameworks of a powerful presentation, a notion crystallized within Tom. For the first time, he didn't just feel like a contributor, he felt like an architect designing his future alongside someone who had been a barrier. Yet that very revelation brought a new wave of anxiety. Would their bid for both acceptance and innovation hold? Or would Claire's earlier doubts return, thwarting everything he had risked? The room buzzed with their energy, but uncertainty still hung like a cloud, foreshadowing challenges ahead. The stakes were higher now than ever, and Tom was determined to rise not just to be seen, but to be unmistakably heard. But as they forged ahead into uncharted territories of influence and collaboration, Tom couldn't shake the ominous feeling that the toughest battles were yet to come. The stakes had changed, but this new alliance could falter at any moment. What if the very structures they were trying to engage with refused to shift? Tom sat at the table, a whirlwind of thoughts clashing within his mind as he sketched out ideas on the notepad. Each stroke of his pen felt like an assertion of his ambitions, but the specter of self-doubt dogged him. What if he overstepped? What if Claire's hesitations turned into outright refusal? The balance between ambition and prudence weighed heavily on him. Between discussions, his eyes flicked cautiously toward Claire. She was reviewing his notes, her brow furrowing, and for a moment, his heart sank. An unsettling thought crept into his mind: was he just a fool with delusions of grandeur? The reality was stark. He had seen the complacency of his peers and the disinterest of higher-ups. If they wouldn't acknowledge the changes needed, how could he expect them to welcome his voice? Tom. Claire's voice broke through his thoughts, and he looked up, meeting her penetrating gaze. What do you want this to lead to? His instinct was to say something grand, to echo back an illusory bravado. But the truth lingered heavier than that. Honestly, I want to build respect. I want to be seen as valuable, not just someone who mops floors. The vulnerability of that admission transformed the conversation. He could sense a shift. They were no longer merely strategizing, they were delving into something deeper. Claire was silent for a moment, allowing the weight of his honesty to settle. Respect isn't just handed out, Tom. It's earned through actions and results. If you want to break the chains of perception that bind you, it'll take relentless determination and a willingness to challenge the status quo. The raw intensity in her voice ignited something in him, a flicker of motivation. Time passed as they delved deeper into constructing their plan, outlining the core ideas he proposed. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. They were embarking on an untested journey, one that could expose them both to ridicule or, conversely, success. But as ideas began to flow, Tom saw the faint glimmer of potential collaboration transform into trepidation. They could outline the methodology, but how would they handle inevitable pushback from their colleagues? Would Claire be there to stand by him when the time for confrontation arrived? A knot twisted in his gut. This presentation, he started, conviction creeping back into his voice. It needs to highlight the tangible benefits, clear metrics and outcomes. If we can show them real evidence of value, they won't have a choice but to listen. Right, she replied, excitement threading through her caution. We need a case study. Something visual that demonstrates what we're proposing, an example that they can't dismiss. There was a spark of teamwork igniting between them, energizing their brainstorming sessions. For the first time, Tom could sense the power of shared goals. Rather than being a lone wolf, he had found an ally. Yet as they formulated strategies, anxiety drummed against his temples. Was their collaboration strong enough to withstand the might of systemic inertia? With each passing hour, Tom's confidence slowly swelled. He was becoming more attuned to the nuances of interaction, recognizing the unspoken words and body language in a way he hadn't before. Would this new awareness grant him the ability to influence the very voices that had silenced him? As they finalized their presentation structure, Tom glanced at the clock. The follow-up meeting was only days away. Each tick echoed with the looming pressure for something to change. In a moment of pause, he contemplated their impending ordeal. Facing the executives meant risking it all: the ridicule, the fear of inadequacy, the possibility of failure. But could this be the awakening he had been aching for? "Tom," Claire said, breaking the silence. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it with absolute commitment. Are you ready to dive deep, come what may?" Tom took a deep breath, the weight of her question wrapping around him. He wasn't just battling a corporate structure, he was grappling with his own fears. But as he sat across from her, something flickered within him, a determination ignited. "Yes," he replied, voice steady. "Let us make them see me." The ground beneath their feet felt both solid and precarious, and as Tom headed home that evening, he felt the dual tug of excitement and anxiety. What if he was ready? Or what if he stumbled? But one certainty loomed larger: when the time came, he had to be prepared not just to speak, but to fight for his place in this new narrative. Yet, in the back of his mind, another unsettling thought lingered: what transformations awaited him in this battle for acknowledgement? Would confronting that intimidating hierarchy reveal more about himself than he had ever known? Tom's mind buzzed with thoughts of the imminent presentation as he turned into his apartment complex. Each step felt deliberate, as if he were consciously choosing his path toward a crucial turning point in his life. The hallway's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, mirroring his flickering confidence. Would he truly command the room or fade into irrelevance? Once inside, he dropped his bag and sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The room was silent, an uncomfortable vacuum surrounding him. He knew he had mere days to convert ideas into a convincing narrative, one that could shake the foundations of indifference. He pulled out his notepad again, leafing through detailed sketches and bullet points that represented his inner visions. Yet doubt seeped in like an unwelcome chill. What if he misfired? What if his attempt to innovate was seen as overreach rather than opportunity? He pinched the bridge of his nose, willing a whirlwind of anxiety to settle. They had shared moments of camaraderie with Claire, laughing at illogical policies, brainstorming paths less trodden, but the pressure of execution now loomed over him like a storm. The potential for their collaborative approach to fail felt like a tempest gathering strength. As he focused on a specific diagram he had drawn, a flowchart depicting change, the thought struck him. What if he leaned into his unique position? The years spent observing from the sidelines had granted him insights that others lacked. The failures of past initiatives were not just strenuous memories, they were lessons that could illuminate their strategy. Yet, exposing his vulnerability through these mistakes was daunting. The warmth of self-discovery enveloped him, as he reflected. His role, initially perceived as insignificant, had granted him access to the intricate workings of the organization. Tom's instincts sensed details that often escaped oversights by those entrenched in their own polished positions. He could illuminate both the folly in complacency and the beauty of leverage through simplicity. He could begin relating his insights to Claire's vision, creating a narrative that showcased genuine understanding, a powerful weapon against the skepticism likely to arise. Resolute, he picked up his pen. Ideas flowed anew as he sketched storytelling avenues, amplifying the case study Claire proposed. Instead of relying solely on metrics, they could add compelling tales from real experiences, framing their vision in a more relatable manner. Emotional connections could be their trump card. He could evoke engagement rather than detached summaries. Hours rolled by unnoticed, engulfed in mind and matter, until fatigue blinked at him through heavy eyes. Cracking his knuckles, Tom sent a message to Claire, seeking another brainstorming session. Ideas now burned brighter, a mixture of calculated risks and heartfelt realities. He felt lighter, as if he had shed the shackles that had bonded him to mundanity, yet the undercurrent of dread wasn't fully displaced. With every design he labored over, the boundaries between excitement and trepidation blended, warning him of the inevitable confrontations ahead. He could already envision the skeptics, the scowls of those predetermined to mock any deviation from their norm, gritty reminders of his place. Still, the thought of standing firm with Claire by his side filled him with courage. Confronting the hierarchy wasn't merely about pushing forward, it was also about enlightening those ensnared in their rigid beliefs. The question now rushed through him: how would they respond when challenged? Would their tight grip on tradition yield to a vision worth embracing? As he drifted off to sleep, thoughts of identity swirled through his mind alongside an inflamed sense of purpose. Each piece that clicked into place conjured an unfamiliar sense of empowerment within him, but as the shadows cradled him in deep sleep, a chilling whisper echoed back at him: what if he unleashed change only to unearth deeper insecurities? Would that be the true test of his resolve? The dawn would break with those uncertainties awaiting him, and he felt the approach of something transformative lingering beyond the horizon. Would he embrace the challenge that faced him to inextricable greatness, or would fear redefine his journey? Morning light filtered through the dusty blinds, casting stripes across Tom's face as he stirred from restless sleep. He blinked hard, shaking off the remnants of a night punctuated by thoughts of unfulfilled potential. It was time to transform those thoughts into action, but the cacophony of his insecurities clamored louder than ever. The delicate interplay between fear and anticipation lingered tangibly in the as he prepared for the day. His reflection in the bathroom mirror caught his eye, a tired version of himself staring back. But he wasn't just the employee forgotten in the corner. He was Tom, a man standing at a precipice, ready to leap. He recalled the daring notion that had surfaced the night before: he could harness his vulnerability as strength. Could he pull that off? He didn't feel entirely ready. Still, he dressed with purpose, tightening his tie, committing to the moment that loomed ahead. The office buzzed when he arrived, a palpable energy running through the open spaces. Claire was already pegged in discussions with a few team members, her animated voice rising above the din. The moment Tom walked in and met her gaze, he felt a tether connect them, a shared promise of collaboration. She smiled, a glint of encouragement in her eyes. Ready for today? Taking a breath, he responded, I am. Let's change the narrative. A sliver of confidence surged, and he felt lighter, emboldened by the partnership they had forged. They settled into a conference room, papers spread out like the remnants of a great battle plan. With each passing minute, Tom honed the story that unfurled from their prepared outlines into something more visceral. They weaved in anecdotes, failures and successes alike that encapsulated the journey of the organization. In doing so, Tom faced an unexpected realization: he was no longer just the observer, he was the storyteller. Yet, the moment of truth arrived all too quickly. The door swung open, and executives trickled in, filling the room with an air of skepticism more suffocating than even he had anticipated. As chairpersons took their seats, murmurs of doubt rippled through the assembly. A sense of impending confrontation gripped him, but he reminded himself, every revolution was born of challenge. Tom initiated the presentation, his voice steady yet charged with urgency. As he laid out their strategy, the flowchart glowed before the audience like a beacon, each arrow and node beckoning them toward possibility. He spoke not only of metrics but of the real, human experiences that those numbers represented. Yet as he advanced, he sensed resistance, a few closed expressions, a questionable glance exchanged between the higher-ups. His palms began to sweat, but memories of late nights spent grappling with ideas flooded in. He could not retreat now. Let me share a story, he declared. During our last initiative, we failed to see the audience's true needs. What we thought was necessary didn't align with their reality. But from that setback. His voice trailed off, and in that silence, he was astonished. He was drawing upon the very insecurities he had feared would haunt him. He had discovered a strength in vulnerability. Across the room, recognition began to shift. Faces transformed from skeptical to contemplative. He was confronting the hierarchy with authenticity, weaving their doubts into the narrative fabric, a powerful defiance against the norm. As he wrapped up, he caught Claire's eye again. Their connection deepened. He saw admiration, a silent acknowledgement of courage mirrored back at him. Yet the true test loomed. He had evoked engagement, but would it be enough to sway skeptics? A member of the executive team raised an eyebrow, preparing to dissect their vision. There are doubts, but also challenges worth facing, he said, leaning forward. What is the underlying thought behind your story? What if it fails again? Tom steadied himself. The time had come to face fears not just his own, but those standing before him. Would he rise to meet the skepticism head-on, or retreat into comfortable obscurity? As the room held its breath, he realized the real battle wasn't just against judgments but against the timid part of himself that remained tethered to the past. The future awaited the answers he was about to reveal, fraught with potential yet unclear. Would the courage to act redefine their path, or would set fears reassert their grip? Tom stood in front of the boardroom, anxiety swirling in his gut while he faced the piercing gazes of the executives. It felt like staring into the abyss of his own insecurities, each question a potential pitfall into a past filled with doubt. Yet, something had shifted deep within him. He had spent countless hours transforming his intuition, observations, and lived experiences into a coherent narrative that illuminated the connection between the human aspect of work and its potential for innovation. With each word he spoke, he felt the barriers forged by their skepticism crumble slightly. "We can learn from our past mistakes," he emphasized, voice steady despite the undercurrent of tension. "Our failures can guide us toward a more inclusive future. It isn't merely about avoiding pitfalls, it's about embracing our collective intelligence." The room felt less hostile now. Executives glanced at one another, some nodding in quiet agreement. Claire watched him closely, her expression both supportive and expectant. They had become partners in this journey, bravely tearing down the walls of hierarchy that had long defined their interactions. Then, he made the daring leap. "Each of us holds the key to progress, even those in roles typically deemed insignificant. The janitor's experiences have illuminated potential solutions that go beyond cleaning, they speak directly to the heart of workplace productivity." In that moment, clarity pierced through his apprehension. He wasn't merely presenting ideas, he was unearthing the power of perspective. His voice, once haunted by fears of inadequacy, surged forward, igniting a dialogue rather than a presentation. Leaders around the table began to engage actively, their questions transforming from skeptical barbs into genuine inquiries about the framework he proposed. That he used every ounce of his newfound confidence to weave their worries into the fabric of his response. "Doubt is a necessary part of innovation, it drives us to reconsider. Let us not fear the possibility of failure but embrace the potential of learning." After an intense exchange of ideas that danced around the room, Tom observed Claire mouthing "thank you" almost imperceptibly, as if expressing gratitude for the journey they had both embarked on together, the fragility of their initial partnership giving way to a formidable alliance. By the end of the meeting, an unexpected consensus emerged. The executives agreed to implement a pilot program focusing on inclusivity, allowing the grassroots ideas of lower-tier employees to flow into the decision-making process. Tom could hardly believe the transformation he had witnessed, not just within the executive meeting but within himself. As they walked out, Claire turned to him, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "You were phenomenal, Tom. You've shifted the narrative for not just yourself, but potentially for the entire company." Tom felt an unfamiliar wave of pride surge within him. He was no longer standing on the fringes of the workplace, he had claimed his space at the heart of the dialogue. Each step resonated with the newfound identity he fought so hard to embrace. This was not just about being recognized, it was about redefining who he was. In the days that followed, Tom immersed himself in this invigorating project. He collaborated with teams to bring their voices to the forefront, forging connections that had previously seemed impossible. The energy he had once seen only in flashes within the office now pulsated through him. His previous role as a janitor had transformed into a crucial point of contact, an essential perspective stepping to the forefront of corporate strategy. Far from detracting from his value, it had carved him a place of respect and authority. A few weeks later, the company celebrated the success of the new initiative, one that merged innovative practices with a profound understanding of employees' needs. Tom stood side by side with Claire, both recognized as leaders navigating uncharted waters, their bond now reaffirmed in shared success. With an established reputation in the company, Tom realized he had achieved not only recognition but earned the profound respect of his colleagues. In that moment of celebration, he felt liberated, deeply satisfied in a way he had never imagined possible. The shadows of self-doubt that once loomed over him had been dispelled, replaced by an indomitable confidence. As he reveled in the culmination of his efforts, it was clear, Tom had not merely conquered the corporate hierarchy, he had transformed into a beacon of inspiration for anyone aiming to break free of their own confines. Now it was clear to him his past had not been a limitation but rather a source of power pointing him toward authentic fulfillment. Tom's journey had etched an undeniable truth into his core: achievement is not merely the result of external validation, it is the journey of confronting one's fears and claiming one's worth. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Real transformation deserves to be celebrated and spread.